The night Choi Tae-yoon walked into that alley, he was carrying 3 dead men's sins and a gun with no bullets left. Rain hammered Busan's backstreets like the sky itself wanted him gone. He was bleeding, he was alone, and the empire he commanded with a single word had just been turned against him from the inside. He should have kept walking. He should never have heard the sound. A small voice, clear as a bell through the downpour. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, sitting on an overturned crate outside a shuttered convenience store, utterly drenched, holding a soggy stuffed rabbit to her chest. She looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much tonight, and then she said the words that split him clean open. "Mister, are you lost too?" He stopped, and in the space of that single heartbeat, something shifted in Choi Tae-yoon that had not moved in 15 years. Something that had been sealed in concrete and ice cracked apart like it had been waiting for this exact moment, this exact child, this exact rain. He looked past her into the doorway and saw a woman crouched against the wall, one arm wrapped around the child, the other pressed flat to a wound her side, her dark brown skin gleaming with rain, her eyes fierce and terrified at once. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and she was staring at him like he was the danger. She was not wrong. Welcome to Afrokorean Central, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. Her name was Rose Adeyemi, and she had been in Busan exactly 11 days when the world tried to kill her. She had come for her sister. That was the whole story, or at least the part she told people. Her younger sister Beezy had married a Korean man named Park Sung-woo 2 years ago, moved to Busan, had a baby girl she named Amara, and then 6 months ago had gotten into a car accident that left her with a fractured spine and mounting hospital bills that her husband's modest salary could not cover. Rose had quit her job in Lagos, packed 2 suitcases, and boarded a plane with her savings tucked into a money belt against her skin. She was a textile designer. She would find work. She would keep her sister's family together. That was the plan. The plan did not account for Park Sung-woo gambling away every Naira equivalent she wired ahead. Did not account for him vanishing entirely on day 4, leaving Beezy bedridden with a 7-year-old daughter and a landlord threatening eviction. Did not account for the loan sharks who came to the apartment on day 9, quiet men with flat eyes who informed Beezy that her husband had borrowed from people who did not accept apologies. They gave her a number. They gave her a deadline. And when Rose had stepped between them and her sister's bed and told them to get out, they had smiled at her in a way that made her stomach turn over. Tonight was the deadline. Rose had taken little Amara and run. She had not planned to end up in an alley with a knife wound at her side, from where one of them had caught her sleeve, and she had pulled away too hard against the fence. It was not deep. She kept telling herself that. It was not deep. It was just bleeding. And if she could just keep Amara calm and quiet until she figured out where the nearest hospital was, everything would be fine. She was pressing her palm against it and breathing through her nose when she heard the footsteps. Heavy, uneven, coming from the mouth of the alley. And then the man appeared. He was enormous in the narrow space. Tall and broad, soaking wet, dressed in what had once been an expensive black shirt now torn at the shoulder. His face was the kind of face that stopped traffic. Sharp jaw, dark brows, cheekbones that could cut glass. But what stopped Rose was his eyes, black and entirely focused. The face of a man who had just survived something terrible and was deciding whether to feel anything about it. He saw Amara first. Then he saw Rose. His whole body went still. Amara, apparently unimpressed by anything the universe had thrown at her this evening, looked up at the large bleeding man in the alley and asked him if he was lost too. Rose wanted to scoop her niece up and run. She genuinely did. But her side chose that exact moment to remind her what a knife-grazed rib felt like, and she made a sound she had not intended to make, and the man took one step forward before she leveled him with a look that could have stopped a train. "Don't," she said. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that. He stopped. He held up both hands, and she registered the split knuckles, the bruising already rising across one cheekbone. He was hurt too. He was hurt worse than her, actually, which did absolutely nothing to make him less terrifying. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. His Korean accented English was low and deliberate, like he was choosing each word carefully. "Are you injured?" "I'm fine," she said. He looked at the blood seeping between her fingers. He looked back at her face. He said nothing, but something in his expression shifted. Not pity, something more complicated than that. Something she did not have a name for yet. Then a sound from the alley entrance. Voices. The lone shark's men, still searching. Rose pulled Amara against her chest. The man turned, and in one fluid motion that told her everything she needed to know about who he actually was, he stepped between them and the alley entrance and became a wall. The men saw him and stopped walking. She watched the color drain from their faces. They left. They just turned around and left, without a single word exchanged. Rose stared at the back of the large man's head, her heart hammering. Amara patted his shoulder experimentally. He turned and looked down at the child. The expression that crossed his face then was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen on a grown man. Like Amara had done something to him. He did not know how to defend against. "Can you walk?" he asked Rose. She was on her feet before the sentence finished. She was not letting this man carry her anywhere. "I don't know who you are," she said. "My name is Choi," he said, "and you need a doctor." What she needed was approximately 17 other things before a doctor, but her side disagreed with all of them. So she held Amara's hand and she followed the most dangerous-looking man she had ever encountered out of that alley, telling herself the whole time that this was absolutely the worst decision she had made in Busan so far. She had no idea how wrong she was. The next morning, Rose woke up in a bed that was not hers, clean white sheets, a room that smelled of cedar and something expensive, bandaging at her side that had been applied with professional precision. Amara curled against her, still asleep, clutching the soggy rabbit which someone had dried and placed back in her hands. Rose sat up very carefully and took inventory. She was still in her clothes. Her bag was on the chair across the room. Her phone was on the nightstand, fully charged. She stood. Her side protested, but held. The room opened into a hallway, and the hallway led to a kitchen where Choi Tae-yoon stood with his back to her, pouring coffee, now in a clean dark shirt, his injuries dressed, his hair still damp from a shower. The shoulder of the shirt pulled slightly, and she could see the edge of ink at the back of his neck. Extensive ink. She had a feeling it did not stop there. He heard her and turned. She had not forgotten he was handsome. She had just hoped daylight would correct her judgment. It did not. "You should still be resting," he said. "I need to know where I am. My house. You needed a doctor. My doctor comes here." "Your doctor comes here," she repeated. He set down the coffee. He looked at her steadily. "I am not a safe man, Ms. Adeyemi. I am aware of that. But last night you needed help, and I am capable of providing it. That is the entire extent of my intentions." She stared at him. "How do you know my name?" "Your phone. Your sister called 11 times. I answered on the 12th and explained the situation." Rose closed her eyes briefly. Beezy must have been having a complete breakdown. "I want to use my phone," she said. "It's on the nightstand." She looked at him a moment longer. He held the look without flinching. There was something in him that was utterly still, like the center of something very large and very powerful. It made her want to push at it, just to see if anything moved. She went back to the room and called Beezy. Her sister was fine. Frightened, in pain, but fine. The man had not returned. Apparently, Rose learned later, that also had something to do with Choi Tae-yoon, though she did not discover that particular fact until much later. A few days passed. Rose found herself a short-term apartment through a contact Beezy's nurse knew, moved Amara in with her, and began the process of rebuilding the disaster her brother-in-law had left behind. She found a part-time position with a small fashion house in Nampodong that needed someone with pattern-making skills. She sat at Beezy's bedside every evening. She did not think about the man from the alley, except she did. Constantly, she thought about the way he had stepped in front of her, without being asked, the way he had looked at Amara like she was something that needed protecting on a molecular level. She thought about his hands, wrapped around a coffee mug, the split knuckles healing over. She thought about what he was. She was not naive. Men whose presence alone cleared an alley of armed thugs were not civilians. On the fourth day, she came home from Beezy's hospital to find a large paper bag outside her apartment door. Inside was a week's worth of groceries, including Amara's specific brand of crackers that Rose had mentioned exactly once to no one. There was no note. She stood in her hallway holding the bag and felt something she did not want to feel. She felt seen. 2 days after that, she saw him again. She was leaving the fashion house when she turned, and he was simply there, across the street, leaning against a black car with his hands in his pockets, watching her. When their eyes met, he did not pretend he had not been watching. He just straightened and waited. She crossed the street because she was furious. "You had me followed," she said. "I had you protected." He corrected. "That is not your job." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She searched his face. He gave her nothing but that absolute stillness and those dark eyes that seemed to record everything about her. "Are you going to keep doing this?" she asked. He considered the question seriously. "Probably," he said. Rose laughed despite herself. It came out before she could stop it, a real laugh, and she watched something happen to his face when he heard it, like he had been handed something he did not know he needed. "Stop protecting me," she said. "I don't need it." "You walked into an alley with a knife wound in a 7-year-old, he said. "Respectfully, Ms. Adeyemi, your judgment about what you need is not yet established." She should have been angry. She was angry. She was also standing this close to him in the fading Busan afternoon light, deeply aware of him in a way that was inconvenient and entirely against her better interest. "My name is Rose," she said, "since you apparently already know it." He looked at her for a moment. "Tae-yoon," he said. "Not Choi. Tae-yoon." She nodded once and walked away. She told herself she was not smiling. Later that week, she found out who he actually was. She found out the way people found out things in a city where the wrong name could end a conversation. Through a whisper that moved from her fashion house employer to the seamstress to the woman who delivered fabric samples, until it reached Rose like a stone dropped from a great height. Choi Tae-yoon, head of the Choi Syndicate, one of the oldest organized crime families in the Busan-Seoul corridor, control over 3 ports, significant influence over the city's political infrastructure, and a reputation for being the most quietly lethal man in the southern region. Not because he was cruel for sport, because he was precise, because nothing he did was ever without purpose, and he had never once been charged with a single crime despite being investigated by every relevant authority for the better part of a decade. Rose sat with this information for an entire evening. She thought about the groceries, the doctor who came to houses, the men who had seen his face in an alley and simply left. She thought about the way he had looked at Amara. She made a decision that was probably going to complicate her life considerably. The next day, she went to find him. This turned out to be harder than expected, because Choi Tae-yoon did not exactly have a shop front, but she asked carefully and followed the thread until it led her to a building in the business district that presented itself as an import consulting firm. She walked in and told the woman at the front desk that she was there to see Choi Tae-yoon. The woman looked at her like she had just requested an audience with a natural disaster. Rose waited. He came out himself. He was in a suit today, charcoal gray, and it did things for his already unreasonable bone structure that she actively resented. He stopped when he saw her. The professional mask he wore in this building slipped slightly, just for a moment, before he recollected it. "You found me," he said. "I have things to say to you," she said. He looked at her for a moment, then held the door open. His office was clean and minimal, nothing decorative except a small bonsai on the windowsill that was, she noticed, very carefully maintained. She stood in the center of the room and faced him. "I know who you are," she said. "I know," he said. "I don't want your protection. I don't want groceries delivered to my door, and I don't want men following me on the street." He was quiet. "And I especially," she said, "don't want to feel like I owe you anything, because I know how that works. I've seen how that works. My sister is in the hospital because of debts, and I will not be another person in your city who owes something to a man like you." He sat down on the edge of his desk and was quiet for a long moment. "No debt," he said finally. She blinked. "There is no debt. There will never be a debt. What I did because it needed doing. That's the end of it." He folded his hands in his lap. "You don't owe me anything, Rose." The way he said her name. She had only given it to him once. Then why? She asked. He looked at the bonsai. He looked back at her. He did not have an answer ready, which he suspected was unusual for him. Finally, he said, quietly and with clear discomfort, because Amara asked me if I was lost. And I haven't been asked that honestly in a long time. Rose stood in his minimal, clean office and felt the floor shift underneath her slightly. This was going to be a problem. A week later, Beezy's doctor told him that with the right rehabilitation program, she could recover most of her mobility. But the cost was staggering. Rose did the math. She did it 3 times. It didn't change. She would need to work double hours at the fashion house, take freelance commissions, and still come up short. She did not go to Tae-yoon. She made that decision early and stuck to it. But Tae-yoon came to her anyway. He showed up at the fashion house on a Thursday evening, and her employer nearly had a coronary, and every person in the building found something pressing to do in the other room. He walked past all of this like he did not notice it, which Rose suspected meant he noticed it perfectly and simply had nothing to prove. "I heard your sister's rehabilitation costs," he said. She put down her patterned shears. "You heard wrong. I know what the program at the Busan Medical Center costs," he said. "I also know what the fashion house pays for freelance pattern work." He paused. "The math doesn't work, Rose." "I'm aware of the math," she said. "That's my problem to solve. Let me help." She looked at him. "No." Something in his expression tightened. "Why not?" "Because you know what it means when men like you help," she said quietly. "It means they own something. And I've spent my whole life making sure nobody owns me or anyone I love. So thank you, but no." He was very still. Then he said, "I'm not trying to own you." "Then what are you trying to do?" The question hung in the air between them. He looked at her with those still, dark eyes, and for just a moment she saw something underneath the control. Something that was not the head of a crime syndicate at all. Something that was almost just a man. "I don't know yet," he said. The same thing he had said before. She picked up her shears. "I'll find the money," she said. "I know you will," he said. And he left. But the next day, the fashion house received a large commercial commission for a boutique chain that had specifically requested their textile work. Rose did not ask questions she was not ready to hear the answers to. By the end of the week, she had enough of the first month of BZ's rehabilitation. She told herself it was a coincidence. Amara had taken to wandering across the hall of their apartment building to knock on the elderly neighbor's door, a habit Rose was trying to correct. But one Saturday afternoon, Rose was working on a commission at the kitchen table and realized she had not heard the child in 20 minutes. And when she stepped into the hallway, Amara was gone. She was not across the hall. Rose went very still in the way she had learned to go still when panic threatened to overtake her, because panic was not useful and she did not have time for it. She took the stairs down to the small courtyard. Amara was there, sitting on the courtyard steps, deep in conversation with Choi Tae-yoon, who was crouched down at her level in an expensive suit, apparently listening very seriously to something about Amara's stuffed rabbit, whose name, Rose had been informed multiple times, was Bolu. She stood in the doorway and watched them. He was asking questions about Bolu with the same focused attention she suspected he gave to board meetings. Amara was answering with the authority of a 7-year-old who has found someone worth talking to. His face was entirely different from his office face, from his alley face, from any face she had seen him wear. It was open in a way that made her chest hurt, slightly. He looked up and saw her. Something passed through his eyes quickly before the careful stillness came back. "She came to find me," he said. "I see that," Rose said. "And he rose," Amara said, very seriously. "Tae-yoon says Bolu needs a waterproof bag for traveling, because rabbits don't like being wet." He's right. Bolu was very unhappy in the rain. Rose looked at the man crouching in her courtyard, having solved the rabbit's existential crisis. She did not know what to do with him. That was becoming a familiar feeling. "Have you been waiting here?" she asked. He stood. "I came to return something." He held out a scarf she had left in his office a week ago. She hadn't noticed it was missing. She had assumed she'd left it on the bus. "You kept it for a week?" she said. "I wasn't sure you wanted to see me," he said, with a directness that left her with nowhere to go. She took the scarf from his hand and their fingers were briefly close, and neither of them moved away for a moment that lasted slightly longer than was strictly necessary. Amara was watching them both with the clear-eyed assessment of a child who understood more than adults expected. She looked up at Tae-yoon. "Are you going to stay for dinner?" she asked. He looked at Rose. Rose looked at him. "If you're inviting yourself," she said, "you're washing the dishes." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. Almost a smile. He was very careful with his smiles. She had noticed. Like he had learned early that they were a form of vulnerability he could not afford. "Almost," he said. "But my dishwashing leaves something to be desired." "Good," Rose said. "I'll watch. It'll be educational." He stayed for dinner. He washed the dishes badly, as promised. Amara supervised him with great seriousness and corrected his technique 3 times. He accepted each correction without complaint. Rose stood at the kitchen doorway watching a man who controlled a crime empire get lectured by a 7-year-old about rinsing, and felt something slide into place inside her that she was not ready to name. The following week, things changed. The fashion house commission brought in more freelancers, including a French-Korean designer named Leon Beaumont, who was visiting from Seoul. He was attractive in an uncomplicated way, easy with compliments, and he asked Rose to dinner on his 3rd day with the kind of confidence that expected a yes. She politely declined. He asked again on the 5th day, and she declined again, and she thought that was the end of it. She was in the sample room on Friday afternoon when she became aware, with the particular awareness one develops when someone is staring very intently, that she was being watched. She turned and Tae-yoon was in the doorway. She had not heard him come in. His expression was a controlled neutral she was learning to read beneath, and what was beneath it now was something she had not seen from him before. He was looking at Leon Beaumont, who was across the room explaining something to the seamstress, and the way Tae-yoon was looking at him was distinctly not neutral at all. She crossed to the doorway. "What are you doing here?" she murmured. He pulled his eyes to her. "Passing by," he said. "You don't pass by places," she said. "You go to them with a purpose." A flicker at the corner of his jaw. "He asked you to dinner," Tae-yoon said. Not a question. She stared at him. "How you know that?" He said nothing. "Tae-yoon," she said quietly, "are you having my workplace watched?" "Not watched," he said. "Checked on." "That is the same thing." He looked at her directly. "I don't like him. You don't know him." "I know enough." His voice was perfectly even, but something underneath, it was not even at all. "Rose, I'm asking you not to go to dinner with him." She felt heat rise to her face, and it was not embarrassment. It was something more complicated. "You don't get to ask me that." "I'm aware." "Then why are you asking?" He was quiet for a beat too long. "Because the thought of you across the table from him makes me want to do things that I have been working very hard not to do." She went very still. The room behind her continued its noise. Leon's voice, the seamstress's laughter. None of it existed in particular silence between Rose and the man in the doorway. "What things?" she asked. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. He looked at her. Just looks at her. The kind of look that takes inventory of everything. "Nothing I'm going to act on," he said finally. "Because you told me not to own things. And I'm trying to respect that." Then he stepped back, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the fashion house. Rose stood in the doorway and breathed very carefully. She did not go to dinner with Leon Beaumont. That evening, she called Tae-yoon. He answered on the 2nd ring. "I didn't go," she said. Silence on his end. Then, "I know. Stop having people report to you about my movements." "I will try." "That's not a yes." "No," he agreed. "It isn't. But I'm trying, Rose." She sat on her apartment floor with her back against the couch. Phone pressed to her ear. Amara was asleep down the hall. The night sounds of Busan came through the window, the distant harbor, the street below. "Tell me something real about yourself," she said. Another silence. This one felt different, like he was deciding something. "I grew up in this city," he said finally. "My father ran this organization before me. My mother died when I was 9. My father died when I was 24, and I took over something I was not ready for, and have been pretending I was ready for ever since." He stopped. "That is the most I have told anyone in approximately 12 years. She let that sit. When you were in the alley, she said, what happened to you that night? He was quiet for a long time. Someone inside my organization tried to remove me. He paused. They underestimated how difficult that is. Are you safe? Currently, yes. He paused. Are you? Currently, she said. Yes. Good, he said. She heard him breathe. Just breathe, which was somehow more intimate than anything else. He was a man who kept very still, who measured every word, who moved through the world like a control weapon. Just hearing him breathe on the other end of phone felt like something he wouldn't give anyone easily. Tae-yoon, she said. Yes. The groceries. She paused. Thank you. A very long pause. You're welcome. She fell asleep on the floor with the phone still in her hand. The next morning, a waterproof bag for a stuffed rabbit appeared outside her apartment door. She held it in her hands in the hallway and closed her eyes and told herself she was absolutely in control of the situation. She was not in control of the situation. The danger escalated without warning. It came on a Tuesday, which Rose had not thought of as a dangerous day. She was leaving Beezy's hospital after an evening visit when she realized the same car had been behind her for 3 blocks. She was thinking clearly, the way her mind sharpened when the situation required it. She ducked into a pharmacy, waited 5 minutes, came out the other side, and the car was waiting at the end of that block too. She called Tae-yoon. He answered before the second ring. What's wrong? She told him, fast and precise. Corner, car color, estimated number of occupants. Don't walk, he said. Stand in front of the pharmacy, under the lights, in view of the cameras. Do not go anywhere with anyone until I tell you. His voice was entirely calm, and it was the calmest she had felt since she noticed the car. 30 seconds. It was 28. A black car she recognized materialized at the curb. One of his men got out, held the door, kept his eyes on the street. She got in. The pharmacy car tried to follow and then, about 2 blocks later, did not try anymore. She arrived at a building she had not been to before. Larger than his office, more secure, the kind of building that did not announce itself. He was at the entrance. She had her coat in her hands, and she was steady, but her hands were shaking, and the moment she was close enough, he saw that, and something happened to his face. He closed the space between them. Not touching, just close, just present. You're all right, he said, quietly, but like he needed to say it, like it was for him as much as for her. You're all right. Who were they? She asked. His jaw moved. Someone who believes they can pressure me through people I care about. The words settled between them. People I care about. She looked up at him. He was looking at her with an expression he had stopped controlling. She could see everything in it. The fury at whoever had sent that car. The fear he would not have admitted to anyone. The relief. You can't do this, she said very quietly. He looked at her. You can't care about me in that way, she said. Not in your world. You told me yourself. You're not a safe man. No, he agreed. I'm not. Then what are we doing? He reached out very slowly and moved a piece of her hair away from her face. He was careful about it, like she was something that could break, which she was not, but the carefulness undid her anyway. I don't know, he said, but I'm not able to stop. She stood in the entrance of his safe house with her shaking hands and her heart doing something medically inadvisable, and she thought about everything. Beezy, Amara, her life in Lagos she had dismantled to come here, the lone sharks who had already tried to cut her, the car that had followed her tonight. Then she thought about waterproof bags for rabbits, about split knuckles wrapped around a coffee mug, about a man crouching to hear a child's opinion with complete seriousness. I need time, she said. I have time, he said. I will wait. She went home. She did not sleep. The next few days shifted between strange normalcy and something that hummed underneath everything. Rose went to work, visited Beezy, managed Amara's school transport. Tae-yoon maintained a distance that respected what she had asked for, but did not pretend she did not exist. The groceries stopped. The men on the street stopped. But he called every evening, just briefly, just to confirm she was home safe, and she had started answering before it rang. Beezy noticed. Her sister was sharp, even propped up in a hospital bed with limited mobility. She watched Rose's face when she talked about nothing in particular and said, "Ayo, tell me about the man." Rose said nothing. "Rose," Beezy said, "you have a face." "I don't have a face." "You have the face. The one you had in secondary school when you liked Emeka and refused to say for 4 months until Chidinma told him for you. That face." Rose looked at the ceiling. "He is," she said carefully, "complicated." "All men are complicated," Beezy said, "but the way you say it means something specific." "Who is he?" She told her sister. "Not everything." "Enough." Beezy was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Is he good to you?" "Yes," Rose said, with more certainty than she expected. "Is he good to Amara?" Rose's throat tightened. "Yes." Beezy looked at her with the specific expression of an older sibling who is setting aside judgment to say something true. Then the rest, she said, is just fear. And fear is not a reason, Rose. It's just noise. Rose sat with her sister's hand in hers and thought about that. That evening, she called Tae-yoon first. She did not wait for him. He answered immediately. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said. "I want to see you." A pause. Measured. But she could hear something happen behind it. "Where?" he asked. "Just come here," she said. "To my apartment." He was there in 20 minutes. She opened the door and he was there with his hands in his pockets in a dark coat, and the look on his face was the most honest thing she had ever seen from him, which was hope barely controlled. She stepped aside. He came in. Amara was in bed. The apartment was small and warm, and smelled of the stew she had made. He stood in her living room looking at it like he was seeing something that did not belong to his world, and was trying to understand why he felt at home in it. She gave him tea. He sat on her couch, too large for it, but managing, and she sat across from him. "I've been afraid," she said. "I know," he said. "Not of you," she clarified. "Of this. Because it's real, and things that are real can be lost." He looked at her steadily. "Everything can be lost." "I know." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "I know that. I've known it since I was small, because everything my family built, everything we try to hold, it could always be taken. And I decided very young that I would not let anyone close enough to take something from me that I couldn't survive losing." He was quiet, listening in the way he had that made her feel like she was the only thing in the room. "And then you," she said. "And Amara liked you immediately, and you were careful with her. And I could see that you were trying so hard not to want anything from me. And that made it worse." "Made it worse," he repeated. "Because men who try not to want things," she said, "are the ones who mean it when they finally stop trying." He set down his tea. He looked at her. "Rose," he said. "I'm still afraid." She said, "I need you to know that." He crossed the room. He sat beside her on the small couch, very close, and he turned toward her, and he said, very quietly, "I'm afraid too. Every day. I've built my entire life around controlling things. And then you walked out of that alley with your hand pressed to your side, and your chin up, and a child who wanted to know if I was lost, and I have not been in control since." She looked at him. This close. She could see everything his face usually hid. All of it. "I'm not going to be easy," she said. "I'm not asking for easy. My world is complicated. So is mine. If you hurt me," she said, "I will not forgive you." He reached out and put his hand over hers on the couch cushion between them. The warmth of it went through her completely. "I know," he said, "and I will spend whatever time you give me making sure you never have to." The sound from the hallway was Amara's door, and then small feet, and then Amara appeared in the living room in her pajamas, looked at the two of them on the couch, and announced calmly that she needed water. Tae-yoon got up and got it. Amara drank, regarded him gravely, and said, "Are you going to be here tomorrow morning?" He looked at Rose. Rose looked at him. "We'll see," Rose said. Amara seemed to consider this fair. She handed back the glass, went back to bed, and shut her door. They sat in the small, warm apartment, and something settled between them that had no name yet, but felt like the beginning of one. He stayed until midnight. When he left, she stood at the door, and he turned at the hallway and looked at her, and for a moment she thought he was going to say something significant. Instead, he said, "Good night, Rose," in a voice so low it was almost just his breath. She closed the door and stood against it and smiled. But the world Tae-yoon lived in did not pause for quietly enormous things happening in small apartments. 3 days later, it arrived. The call came at 7 in the morning. Rose was at the kitchen table with coffee and a pattern sketch when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost did not answer it. Then she did, because she had learned in Busan that unknown numbers were rarely nothing. The voice on the other end was male, unhurried, and spoke in Korean accented English with the specific calm of someone who was not calm at all, but wanted her to think they were. "Ms. Adeyemi," he said, "my name is not important. What is important is that you understand your current situation. You have become a liability to someone who cannot afford liabilities. I am offering you a very simple solution. Leave Busan, take the child, take your sister, and go back to wherever you came from. If you choose to stay, the consequences will not be limited to you." She kept her voice level. "Who are you?" "Someone who has been asked to deliver a message," he said. "Consider it delivered." The line went dead. Rose set the phone down on the table. She looked at her coffee. She looked at the pattern sketch. She breathed in and out exactly 3 times. Then she called Tae-yoon. He answered before the second ring, as always. "What's wrong?" She told him, word for word. The silence on his end was not the silence of someone surprised. It was the silence of someone containing something very large. "Are you in the apartment?" he asked. "Yes." "Don't leave. I'm coming." She was going to tell him she did not need him to come, that she was fine, that she had handled worse. She said none of it because her voice had started doing something she refused to let it do in front of him. She just said, "Okay." He was there in 12 minutes. He came through the door and his eyes went straight to her face and cataloged everything with that precision she had come to recognize as a specific form of caring. He crossed the table and sat across from her and said, "Tell me again, everything." Slowly, she told him. His jaw was tight the entire time. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "This is Shin Dae-won," he said. "A man who believes I should be removed from my position and replaced by someone more cooperative with his interests. He has been trying for 8 months. He exhaled slowly. "He found out about you." "How?" "I am not always as discreet as I should be," he said. And something in the way he said it made her understand that he meant he had not been discreet, because he had been unable to make himself pretend she did not exist. He looked at her directly. "I'm sorry. This is because of me. I know that." He flinched slightly, which she had not seen him do before. "I need you to come somewhere safer," he said. "Your sister, Amara, all of you, tonight." She looked at him. "For how long?" "However long it takes," he said. "I will resolve this. I need to know you're secure. While I do." Rose sat back in her chair. She thought about Legos, about the life she had assembled there before Beezy's accident, the independence she had built piece by piece. She thought about everything she had said about owing nothing to no one. Then she looked at the man across her kitchen table, who had driven here in 12 minutes, and was watching her with everything he felt right there on his face, making no effort to hide it. "What does resolving it mean?" she asked. He met her eyes. "It means Shin Dae-won stops being a problem." She held his gaze. "Are you going to be safe?" His expression shifted into something soft and surprised, like he had not expected the question. Like the relevant concern being his safety rather than hers was something he had not prepared for. "That's my job," he said. "That's not an answer," she said. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I am going to do everything in my power to come back to you," he said. "That is the most honest answer I have." She turned her hand under his and held it. That evening, Beezy was transported to a private medical facility that Tae-yoon's people maintained, discreet and fully equipped, with Amara installed in a room beside her that had been stocked with books and crafts and a television that played cartoons. Amara regarded the whole operation with the equanimity of a child who had adapted to a lot this year. Rose stayed. Tae-yoon watched her with Beezy for a while from the doorway, his face doing the thing it did when he thought she wasn't looking, open and unguarded and a little wrecked. She came to him in the hallway when Beezy fell asleep. "You don't have to stand in the doorway," she said. "I didn't want to intrude." She looked at him. "You transported my whole family in 2 hours, and you're worried about intruding? Those are different things," he said. She laughed quietly. He looked at her, laughed the way he always did, like it was something he was storing carefully. She stepped closer to him. He went very still. "Come back safe," she said. "Whatever you're going to do, come back." His hand came up and touched her face, just the side of it, his thumb at the edge of her cheekbone, and she leaned into it slightly, because she could not stop herself and she had stopped pretending she wanted to. "I will," he said. His voice was rough. She reached up and covered his hand with hers, keeping it there. The moment stretched. He said her name. Just her name, in that low, deliberate voice, with everything in it that he had been not saying for weeks. She went up on her toes and kissed him. He was still for exactly half a second, like his entire system was recalibrating. Then his hand slid to the back of her neck, and he kissed her back, and it was nothing like the careful, controlled person he presented to the world. It was certain and deep and full of everything he had been containing. She felt it in her sternum. She felt it everywhere. When they broke apart, they were both breathing like they had run somewhere. She kept her hands in his lapels. His forehead dropped to hers. "Rose," he said again. Just her name, like he needed to confirm she was real. "Go handle it," she said quietly, "and then come back." He pressed his lips to her forehead and let her go. He walked down the hall, and he did not look back, and she watched him until he turned the corner, because she was not going to be the woman who looked away first. The next 48 hours were the longest of Rose's life. She threw herself into work. She had her laptop, her pattern sketches. She sat with Beezy and they talked about home, about their mother, about the things they were going to do when Beezy could walk properly again. Amara brought her drawings. The facility staff were quiet and efficient and left them alone. Tae-yoon second, a man named Jisoo who had the specific demeanor of someone who had seen everything and was no longer impressed by any of it, checked on the morning and evening without being asked. He gave Rose a phone number and told her to use it for any reason, day or night. She did not use it. She called Tae-yoon instead, and he always answered wherever he was. On the second night, he called her. "It's done," he said. She let out a breath she had been holding for 2 days. "Is everyone safe? Your people?" "2 injuries, not critical." He paused. "I'm coming back tonight." She was awake when he arrived. The facility was quiet. 2 in the morning, the halls lit in that particular soft blue of nighttime institutional lighting. She heard the doors and knew it was him before she saw him. He came around the corner and stopped when he saw her waiting. He looked exhausted. He looked like he had not slept and had carried something very heavy and had put it down at the door. He looked like himself. She went to him. He wrapped his arms around her and she let him, and he held on with the specific grip of someone who's been moving at high speed toward danger and is now holding the thing they were moving to protect. She felt him breathe. She felt the tension in him slowly settle. "You came back," she said against his shoulder. "Told you I would." She pulled back enough to look at him. There was a bruise at his temple she had not been warned about. "You're hurt." "Minor," he said. His hands were still at her back. "I'll decide that," she said. "Sit down." He sat, which told her how tired he was, and she went to find the facility's first aid supplies, and she sat across from him and dealt with the bruise, and the split at his lower lip she had also noticed, and he watched her do it with an expression that had no control in it whatsoever. "You're very calm," he said. "I'm not," she said. "I just finish things before I fall apart." He caught her wrist gently when she finished. She looked up at him. "I will spend the rest of my life," he said, "making sure you never have to be this calm again on my behalf." She looked at him for a long moment. "That a very large promise," she said. "I'm a very serious man," he said. She laughed, and he smiled, a real one, and it was the first full smile she had seen from him, and it dismantled her completely. He was devastating when he smiled. It was unfair. She was going to have to write a formal complaint to someone. That night, they sat in the small lounge at the end of the hall and talked until almost 4 in the morning about everything. His mother, who had loved bonsai, which was why he kept one. Her grandmother, who had taught her textiles and stubbornness in equal measure. The city he had inherited and what it cost. The city she had come from and what she missed. Amara and how Beezy was the strongest person either of them had ever met. He told her things he said He had not told anyone. She told him things she had kept folded away for years. When she finally fell asleep on the lounge couch, he put his jacket over her and sat in the chair across from her and watched over her until morning. She woke to find him asleep in the chair himself, head dropped back, completely out for the first time in days, and she sat for several minutes just looking at him in the early light. She thought, quietly and with great clarity, I love this man. Then she thought, this is going to require a serious conversation. Then Amara appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, looked at Tae-yoon asleep in the chair, looked at Rose, and whispered very carefully so as not to wake him. Is he staying now? Rose looked at her niece, at the sleeping man in the chair. Yes, she said, I think he is. Amara nodded with deep satisfaction. Went to get a rabbit, and came back to climb into the couch beside Rose and wait patiently for him to wake up. 3 weeks later, Beezy moved into a proper rehabilitation center with a private room, and Rose moved back into her apartment. And Tae-yoon developed a habit of appearing there most evenings in a way that had begun as checking on her safety, and had quietly become something else entirely. Something that involved him knowing where her good mugs were kept, and Amara saving him the seat next to hers at dinner. He was different here than he was anywhere else. She had seen him in his building, in his world, surrounded by men who moved out his path and spoke to him in careful tones. The stillness, there was armor. Here, in her small, warm apartment with the city sounds coming to the window, and Amara explaining rabbit psychology, the stillness was just him. One evening he brought groceries and cooked. She sat at the counter and watched him navigate her kitchen with competent efficiency, and felt the particular warmth of watching someone make themselves useful in your space. Where did you learn to cook? She asked. He told her about his grandmother, who had lived with him after his mother died, who had decided that grief was not an excuse to stop eating, and had put him to work in the kitchen at age 11. He told her this while stirring something that smelled extraordinary, and she rested her chin in her hand and thought about the 11-year-old version of him and felt something tender and fierce at the same time. You don't talk about your family much, she said. I don't have much family left, he said. She was quiet. You do now, she said, if you want it. He stopped stirring. He turned and looked at her. She met his eyes. I mean Amara and Beezy. They've already decided. I'm just informing you officially. He looked at her for a long moment. And you? He said quietly. She held his gaze. I decided in an alley in the rain. I've just been taking my time telling you. He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and kissed her, and she wrapped her hands in his shirt and kissed him back. And it was a different kind of kiss from the first one, not the contained explosion of relief and longing. This was something slower, more certain, like a door that had been opening gradually and had finally swung all the way. They were interrupted by Amara, who walked in, assessed the situation, said it's about time in a tone of profound adult satisfaction, took a cracker from the counter, and walked back out. They broke apart and looked at each other. Then they both laughed. Really laughed. The kind that takes over. And Rose pressed her face against his chest because she needed somewhere to put it. And his arms went around her. And he was laughing too in a way she suspected he had not done in a very long time. This, she thought, this exact thing. This is what I was afraid to want. The months that followed were not without turbulence. Tae-yoon's world did not become safe simply because she loved someone in it. There were nights when he was unreachable. Mornings when Jisoo called instead of him and she had to wait. A meeting with the Choi organization senior people where she sat at the end of a long table and was assessed by men who were deciding whether she was acceptable, and she looked back at them with her chin level and said very little, which was apparently exactly right, because afterward Tae-yoon told her his deputy had said she had presence. She told him his deputy needed better compliments. He looked at her with that almost smile and said, I told him that. Beezy's rehabilitation progressed. By the 4th month, she was walking short distances. The first time she took 3 steps across her room unaided, Rose was there and she cried and Beezy cried, and Amara cheered and clapped and immediately informed Tae-yoon by phone because he had given Amara his direct number, a fact Rose had feelings about. He arrived within an hour. He brought flowers for Beezy and crackers for Amara, and a look for Rose that contained everything he could not say in a hospital room. And Beezy watched with his sister's eyes and gave Rose a look over his shoulder that said, clearly and without ambiguity, Keep him. I know, Rose said. Beezy grinned. Tae-yoon looked between them. What? Nothing, they said together. He narrowed his eyes. He had learned that coordinated innocence between them meant something significant was being communicated. He did not press it. He was learning. The danger came back, because it always did. This time was not a phone call. Rose was at the fashion house, late, finishing a commission deadline, when the lights in the building went out all at once. Not a power fluctuation. All at once, completely, leaving only the emergency strips at floor level. Her phone had no signal. She was not alone. Two of the junior seamstresses were still in the back room. She went to them and kept her voice steady and said they were going to stay together and stay calm. And she was already moving them toward the interior room that had no windows when the front door opened. 3 men. She did not know their faces, but she knew what they were. One of them said her name. She put herself between the seamstresses and the men and said, "Whatever this is, it has nothing to do with these women. You want me? Let them leave." The man who had said her name smiled. He had the particular smile of someone being paid for a task they find uncomplicated. "We're not here to hurt anyone," he said. "We just need you to come with us." The seamstresses were crying quietly behind her. She was not. She was calculating. She was also, she realized with a distant part of her brain, not afraid in the way she expected to be. She was very focused. She was also furious. She said, "Give me one moment." She pulled out her phone. No signal. She went through motions anyway, held it up, moved sideways as if trying to find reception, and in doing so, triggered the emergency contact protocol that Jisoo had personally installed on her phone 2 months ago, which did not require signal to send, only GPS. The man stepped forward. She met him with eye contact that made him pause. "If you touch me," she said, "you are going to regret it at a level that I promise will be comprehensive." He paused. Then he almost smiled again. "Lady, I'm told you're important to someone very powerful. Important people don't get hurt. They get held." She thought about Tae-yoon. About 12 minutes or 28 seconds. About what the word important sounded like in someone else's voice versus his. "Fine," she said. "I'll come." She went because the seamstresses needed to go home safely. She went because she had triggered the GPS, and she trusted the people on the other end of it. She went because she was Rose Adeyemi, and she did not fall apart. She found the exit. They took her to a warehouse near the port. The man behind it was not Shin Dae-won, who was gone. This was someone new, a businessman type with expensive shoes, and a specific calculation of someone who had decided that the most efficient path to leverage over Choi Tae-yoon ran directly through the Nigerian woman in the small apartment with the good mugs. His name, she found out from his own introduction, was Oh Kwang-soo, and he wanted access to shipping routes that Tae-yoon controlled. She sat across from him in a warehouse chair and kept her face entirely still. "You think he'll trade for me?" she said. "I think he's incapable of not trading for you," Oh Kwang-soo said, "which makes you the most valuable asset in Busan right now." She looked at him. "You've made a mistake," she said. "Oh, you think being valuable to him makes me a leverage point," she said. "But you don't understand what kind of valuable." She paused. "The kind of valuable I am to him means he isn't going to trade anything. He's going to come here." Oh Kwang-soo smiled. "That's rather the point." She looked at him with an expression she had inherited from her grandmother, who had never in her life been intimidated by a man who thought he was clever. "No," she said, "that's your mistake. You think he'll come here to negotiate. He won't." Before Oh Kwang-soo could respond, the building shook. Not an earthquake. 3 simultaneous points of entry, structured and precise, the sound of a professional and absolute. Oh Kwang-soo was on his feet. His men were already moving, and through the chaos of the next 4 minutes, which he navigated by staying very still and very low behind the chair, she tracked the sounds and understood them. This was over. This had been over from the moment she triggered the GPS. Then the noise stopped. Footsteps. Deliberate. She knew them. Tae-yoon came through the door. He was in dark tactical clothing, and he had his phone in his hand, and his eyes swept the room and found her in approximately 1 second. He crossed to her in 3 steps and crouched in front of her and put his hands on her face. Rose, are you hurt? No, she said. Are you? No. He was scanning her, cataloging, making sure. His hands were very steady, but she could feel the effort of that. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This should never have happened. She put her hands over his on her face. You came. 46 minutes, he said, from the GPS signal. I should have been faster. You were fast enough, she said. He pulled her into him and she let herself be pulled, and she pressed her face against his neck, and she felt him breathe, ragged and real and close, his arms locked around her. Later she would think about what it cost him, those 46 minutes. What it was to be the most powerful man in the room in most rooms, and to have someone take the thing that mattered most and make him wait. She understood then why he had always been so still. Because when something finally moved him, it moved him completely. He helped her to her feet. His hand did not leave hers. They got her out of there, in the car, with his hand still in hers, and Jisoo driving and the city lights moving past. He said quietly, "This can't keep happening." "I know," she said. "I need to make changes," he said, "to how I operate, how visible I am. I've been thinking about it for months." He looked at her. "There are people who can take over the parts of this that require what I've been doing. I don't have to be Choi Tae-yoon the way I've been being him." She looked at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want a life where you can walk home from work without a GPS emergency protocol," he said, "and I'm willing to build it. I have been building it. But I need to know that you want that life with me." The car was quiet except for the city sounds. Amara had told her that morning at breakfast, with the complete authority of a 7-year-old who has done significant thinking on a matter, that Tae-yoon should live with him because it was inefficient for him to keep going home. She had used the word inefficient, which she had clearly absorbed from somewhere, and Rose had been trying not to think about it. She thought about it now. She turned to face him in the back seat. "If you transition out," she said carefully, "will you be safe?" He met her eyes. "It will take time. And there are risks in the transition. I won't pretend otherwise. But at the end of it, he said, "I want to be someone who can sit in your kitchen without bodyguards at the door." She held his gaze. "Amara said you should move in." He went very still. "She said it this morning at breakfast. Rose said, I'm just reporting it. And what do you say?" His voice was very low. She looked out the window at Busan passing by, at this city that had tried to swallow her whole, and had instead given her something she had not come here looking for. "I say," she said, "that Amara is extremely perceptive and usually right." His hand tightened on hers. They did not say anything else until they got home. The months that followed were a long, careful unwinding. Tae-yoon transferred authority over the syndicate's operational structure to a council of 3 senior people, men who had run individual divisions for years and were capable of the work. He was not naive about it. There were complications, negotiations, a period of 3 months during which Rose watched him age slightly and work constantly, and come home to her kitchen with particular exhaustion of someone dismantling something they built with their hands. She fed him. She listened. She did not pretend it was easy because it was not easy, and he did not need her pretend. Beezy learned to walk without assistance on a Tuesday in the 6th month, and they celebrated in the rehabilitation center with smuggled-in food, and Amara doing a dance she had invented for the occasion. And Tae-yoon sat beside Beezy and talked with her for a long time about what she wanted to do when she was fully recovered, and afterward Beezy told Rose, "He listens like it matters. The things you say actually land with him. That's rare, Rose. That's actually rare." Rose knew. He moved in on a Sunday. He did not move much in. A bag, his work clothes, the bonsai from his office window. Amara welcomed the bonsai with a level of ceremony that suggested she had been waiting for it specifically. That first evening, all 4 of them at the table. Rose is cooking. Amara explained to Tae-yoon her current theory about why Bo the rabbit preferred the left side of her bed. Beezy laughing at something Tae-yoon said in response. The apartment full of voices and warmth and the sounds of a meal being eaten together. Rose sat in the middle of it and held it. She had come to Busan with 2 suitcases and a money belt and a plan. The plan had not included any of this. The plan had been about survival, about holding things together, about not letting anyone take anything else from the people she loved. The plan had not accounted for an alley in the rain and a man who didn't know he was lost. She caught Tae-yoon, looking at her across the table. He had the open face on, the one she had learned to recognize, the one she suspected very few people had ever been allowed to see. Just his real face, with everything in it. The full weight of what this table meant to him, this meal, this noise, this ordinary and extraordinary thing of being somewhere you belong. She mouthed, "What?" He shook his head slightly. "Nothing." She narrowed her eyes. He almost smiled. After dinner, after Amara was in bed and Beezy had retired, they sat on the small balcony in the Busan night with tea and the distant sound of harbor. He had something in his jacket pocket that he had been not reaching for all evening. She had noticed he was not a man who fidgeted, but there had been a specific stillness in that particular hand. "Tae-yoon," she said. He looked at her. "What's in your pocket?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached in and held it out. A small box. Simple, not ostentatious. She had come to understand that about him. The things he chose carefully were never loud. They were exact. She looked at the box, then at him. "This is not something I planned," he said. "I had 6 speeches. I threw them all away because they sounded like something I would say in a boardroom, and you deserve better than that." He paused. "So I'm just going to tell you the truth, which is that you found me in an alley when I was in the worst moment of my life, and you were bleeding and terrified, and you still held that child like she was more important than what was happening to you. And I looked at you and something in me said, 'This is the one.'" He exhaled. "I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't always know what to do with it. But I know that wherever you are is where I want to be. And I know that whatever you're building, I want to be part of building it. And I know that Amara is correct about most things. And she told me last week that I should do this soon, because she is ready for me to be family officially." Rose laughed. It came out wet around the edges. She made a face at herself and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He watched her do it with an expression that was going to cost her. "I'm not crying," she said. "I know," he said. She took the box from him and opened it. The ring inside was not what she expected, which meant it was exactly right. Not a diamond. Something deeper in color. Dark blue with what looked like a thread of light through its center, set in simple gold. The kind of ring that was chosen by someone who paid attention to the specific person. "When did you find this?" she asked. "For months ago," he said. "I was waiting for the right moment. You keep telling me my timing is not always good." She looked up at him. "For months ago, I was yelling at you about the seamstresses. You are always beautiful when you are angry," he said, completely seriously. She started laughing again, and he looked at her laughing with that face he always had for it, like he was storing it somewhere safe. She held out her hand. He slid the ring on, and it fit like it had been made for her, which she would find out later had. He had measured her ring size without her knowledge using a ring she wore on her right hand, which he told him was invasive and clever in equal measure. She looked at her hand. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. He cupped her face in both hands. "You didn't let me ask yet," he said. "You were taking too long," she said. Something happened to his whole face at once. The last wall, the last controlled distance, gone. Just him. Just this. He pressed his forehead to hers, and for a moment they just sat there in the Busan night, breathing the same air, the harbor sound below them, the lights of the city they had both learned to call home. Then he kissed her with everything he had never said out loud, and she held on, and the night was warm, and the harbor was bright, and somewhere inside the apartment Boulder Rabbit was probably exactly where Amara said he preferred to be. They married in the spring. Not a large wedding. Tae-yoon had spent enough of his life being visible in ways that cost something. This was for them. A garden ceremony. Beezy walking unassisted to her seat with tears streaming unchecked down her face. Amara in a dress she had very strong opinions about. Jisoo serving as best man with the specific expression of a man who had expected this outcome from approximately the second alley incident and was gratified to be right. Rose walked herself. She had no one to give her away, and she did not need anyone to do it. She walked to Tae-yoon herself, and he stood and watched her come with his full open face and his hands clasped in front of him like he was holding them there specifically to stop himself from going to meet her. She reached him. He looked at her in her dress in the spring garden and said, very quietly so only she could hear, "You are the most extraordinary person I have ever seen." She straightened his collar, which did not need straightening. "You're biased," she said. "Completely," he agreed. Amara, standing beside them as their self-appointed coordinator, said, "Can we start now?" An officiant laughed and said yes, and they did. 8 months later, on a morning in winter with the harbor fog sitting low over Busan, Rose stood in the bathroom of the apartment they had long since expanded into something that could hold them all, and she looked at 2 pink lines, and she sat down on the edge of the tub and put her hands over her mouth. She sat like that for 4 minutes. Then she went to find Tae-yoon. He was in the kitchen, coffee, phone, the morning. He looked up when she came in, and his expression changed immediately the way it always did. Reading her face with precision she had stopped arguing with. "Rose," he said. She held up the test. He went very still. Then he crossed the kitchen and took it from her hands and looked at it. And she watched his face move through something she had never seen from him before and would spend the rest of her life being glad she was there to see. Something that was completely undone. Something that broke through every layer of stillness and control and history and left just a man underneath, standing in her kitchen with shaking hands. He looked up at her. She nodded. He sat down on the kitchen floor. She had never seen him sit on the floor in his life. She sat down across from him, and they looked at each other on the kitchen floor in the winter morning. And he put his hands over her hands. And he did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I was lost." She looked at him. He looked back. That night, in the alley, I had been running the organization for 15 years, and I had won everything, and I owned nothing. I was completely lost. He was not crying, but he was close to it in a way she would tell no one about, because it was his. I didn't know it until she asked me. "Amara," she said, "she asked me if I was lost too. And I looked at you, and I thought, I don't know yet. And then I found out." He squeezed her hands. "I found out because of you." Rose leaned forward and kissed him, soft and sure, and he kissed her back, and they sat on the kitchen floor in the light of a Busan winter morning, and the city moved outside, and somewhere down the hall Amara was waking up, and somewhere across town Beezy was beginning her day, and the harbor was gray and cold and entirely beautiful. She pulled back and looked at him. "You're going to be an incredible father," she said. He looked at her. His face was the open face. "All of it. I'm going to try," he said. "Every day. I'm going to try." She put her head on his shoulder. He put his chin on her hair. They sat on the kitchen floor and waited for Amara to find them, which she did 3 minutes later. And the look on her face when she understood what she was seeing was a 7-year-old's version of "I knew it all along," which was entirely accurate. Amara sat down between them on the kitchen floor, took their hands on either side of her, and said to no one in particular, "We're a family now. For real." "Yes," Tae-yoon said, his voice low and certain. "For real," Rose said. And Busan went on outside, and the fog lifted from the harbor by noon, and a man who had once walked into an alley having lost everything discovered, as he often reflected on later, that the very best things in his life had been found in a moment when he was not looking at all. Only by a child who looked up at him in the rain, and asked the only question that mattered. "Mister, are you lost too?" He was, and then he wasn't, and that was the whole story. If you stayed with us until the very end of this one, besties, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Tae-yoon and Rose absolutely wrecked me, and I hope they wrecked you too, in all the right ways. Drop a comment right now, and tell me your favorite moment. Was it the alley? The kitchen floor? Amara being the real MVP this entire story? Because honestly, Amara deserves her own spin-off, and I am very open to that conversation. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs a good love story today. And subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. I see every single comment, and I read every single one. Watching from Lagos, London, Toronto, Busan? Let me know. Until next time, beautiful souls. Keep believing in love that finds you when you're lost. Stay blessed, stay loved, and I'll see you in the next one.